On Wednesday, August 27, 1952, at exactly 6:47 a.m., Bumpy Johnson was following his regular morning route through the blocks surrounding West 139th Street in Harlem. Walking beside him was a companion who had remained at his side for 8 consecutive years, a German shepherd named Justice. The dog had earned that name more than once, not symbolically, but through action. The first instance dated back to 1948, when Justice detected an ambush before it could unfold. His instincts alerted Bumpy to 3 armed men lying in wait, preventing gunfire before a single shot was fired. The second time came in 1950, when Justice physically attacked a knife-wielding assailant, intercepting a blade that had been aimed directly at Bumpy's neck. A long scar across the dog's left shoulder remained as evidence of that moment. It was a daily reminder of loyalty that transcended instinct, something that moved beyond the usual bond between a man and his animal. This was trust shaped by violence and confirmed through blood. Justice was never just a pet, nor did he fit the simple definition of a guard dog. In Harlem, where Bumpy Johnson acted as both protector and enforcer of street justice, the German shepherd came to represent something larger than himself. Neighborhood children knew they could approach Justice without hesitation. They understood that beneath his size and the echoing bark that carried off the brownstone walls, he posed no threat to the innocent. Shopkeepers viewed the dog as a visible extension of Bumpy's protection, a clear sign that the area was under watch. And the criminals, the ones who worked quietly in Harlem's margins and occasionally forgot where they were, recognized Justice as an early warning system for a man who could not be surprised, could not be ambushed, and should never be crossed under any condition. That morning followed the same routine as every morning for the past 8 years. Bumpy and Justice walked the identical path from 139th Street to Lenox Avenue, down to 125th, across to 7th Avenue, and back through the center of what locals simply called the Kingdom. It looked like nothing more than a casual walk, but it was a quiet patrol. Bumpy's way of surveying his neighborhood personally before the day's complications began. Justice moved slightly ahead and to Bumpy's left, his training so ingrained that a leash was unnecessary. His ears constantly shifted, catching sounds beyond human range. His nose filtered through layers of city scent, searching for anything unfamiliar: foreign cologne, gun lubricant, or the sharp chemical trace produced when fear mixes with violent intent. They stopped at Marcus Webb's apartment on 136th Street, just as they did every Wednesday. Marcus was already awake, coffee brewing as he prepared for his day as Bumpy's lieutenant and most trusted enforcer. "Morning, boss." "Morning, Justice." Marcus carried dog treats in his pocket specifically for these visits, thick strips of dried beef that Justice accepted with calm restraint, the manner of an animal aware of his own importance. As the two men discussed business territorial tensions requiring mediation, overdue collections, intelligence on Genevieve's family activity in Italian Harlem, Justice lay at Bumpy's feet. He appeared relaxed, but remained alert, his presence a steady constant in a life built around controlled disorder. By 8:15 a.m., Bumpy and Justice returned to Bumpy's brownstone on 139th Street. The 3-story building served as both residence and unofficial headquarters of Harlem's most powerful operation. Bumpy had purchased it outright in 1947, cash payment, no mortgage, no bank trail. A clean transaction that placed his name on the deed and anchored his power in the center of his territory. The ground floor functioned as an office and meeting space, while the upper floors remained private living quarters for Bumpy and, when she was in town, his wife. That morning, Mame was visiting family in Philadelphia, leaving Bumpy alone in the house alone, except for Justice, who always stayed close whenever she was away. The day ahead was full. A sit-down with numbers. Runners scheduled for 10 a.m. lunch with a police captain, who had proven useful in limiting NYPD interference. An afternoon meeting with legitimate Harlem business owners who paid for protection that was real, not predatory. It was the kind of schedule that kept Bumpy in the brownstone, which meant Justice would spend the day doing what he did best, lying quietly in the office, appearing asleep while maintaining an awareness sharper than most hired guards. At 9:30 a.m., Bumpy stepped out briefly to address an emergency 3 blocks away. A dispute between 2 shop owners had begun to escalate toward violence and required immediate intervention. He left Justice behind with a single command: guard. The word had been spoken thousands of times. A command that shifted Justice instantly from companion to sentinel, from animal to protector. He positioned himself in the center of the ground floor office, lying down with his head raised, eyes fixed on the front door, ears tracking every sound from the street outside. What Bumpy did not know, what he could not have known, because the information had been deliberately withheld by someone he trusted, was that 5 men had been watching the brownstone for 3 straight days, studying routines, measuring time, waiting for this exact moment. It was an hour when the building would be empty of its owner. The dog would remain, Bumpy would not. A narrow opening of time designed not for efficiency, but for impact. A message meant to cut deeper than gunfire, to leave a wound that would last longer than any injury they could ever inflict on Bumpy Johnson himself. The 5 men were professional contract killers employed by the Genovese crime family. They were participants in a quiet but escalating power struggle that had been boiling ever since Bumpy's devastating execution of 29 mobsters at the Little Italy massacre 9 months earlier. Vito Genovese had died in that bloodbath. His organization, however, had survived, now operating under new leadership. The new boss, Anthony "Tony" Bender Strato, had chosen a different approach. He wanted dominance restored through psychological damage rather than the direct confrontation that had ended so disastrously before. Tony Bender understood a crucial truth. You did not defeat Bumpy Johnson with brute force. You defeated him by breaking something inside first, by showing him that nothing in his world was untouchable, that his control had limits, that even what he loved most could be taken away. The 5 hitmen had been selected carefully for this exact purpose. Vincent "Vinny the Camera" Lombardo, 41 years old, had earned his nickname by recording his murders on film. He kept the footage as trophies and occasionally used it to intimidate rivals. He had been promised a bonus if he could capture Bumpy's reaction on camera when the Godfather of Harlem discovered what had been done to his dog. Frankie "Knuckles" Gallo, 38, was a former boxer who drifted into organized crime. After killing an opponent in the ring and realizing he possessed a taste for violence without rules, bells, or referees, Salvatore "Sally Hooks" Martino, 35, had grown up working in his family's meatpacking business before transitioning into murder for hire. He brought with him a disturbing expertise in how bodies could be cut, processed, destroyed, and eliminated using industrial equipment. Giuseppe "Joey Chains" Romano, 33, specialized in abductions. He was known for removing targets from streets and homes with such speed and precision that witnesses often convinced themselves they had imagined the event. Dominic "Dom the Torch" Esposito, 29, was the youngest of the group and possibly the most dangerous. An arsonist and agent of chaos, he enjoyed destruction for its own sake and had been disciplined more than once by his own organization for excessive brutality. The 5 men approached Bumpy's brownstone at 9:47 a.m., fully aware they had roughly 30 minutes before the Godfather returned from his arbitration 3 blocks away. Joey Chains had already neutralized the basement window lock during surveillance 2 nights earlier, leaving it looking secure while actually being easy to breach for anyone who knew where to apply pressure. They entered through the basement window. In practiced order. Joey first, to confirm the path was clear. Sally followed, then Vinny, Frankie next. Dom brought up the rear. Justice heard them before they ever reached the stairs. His ears caught the scrape of the window opening. His instincts registered the sound of 5 separate men breathing, moving, advancing upward toward the ground floor. The German Shepherd rose from his resting position. His lips peeled back, revealing teeth capable of exerting over 300 pounds of pressure per square inch. A growl formed deep in his chest, starting low and building into a warning that should have sent any rational human being retreating immediately. This was not the bark of a household pet defending territory. It was the warning of a trained protection. Animal one that had already proven he was willing to fight and die for the man he was bonded to. An animal that would not retreat, would not yield, and would not show mercy to anyone threatening what he had been ordered to protect. But the 5 hitmen hadn't come to reason with the dog. They had come to kill one, and they had prepared for Justice's response with the detached calculation of men who had murdered dozens of human beings without hesitation or guilt. Vinny. The camera had his tool ready. Not a firearm that would have been too fast, too clean, too merciful for what Tony Bender had ordered. Instead, he carried a specialized catch pole with a noose at the end, similar to those used by animal control. This one, however, had been altered. Barbs lined the inside of the loop. Once tightened around Justice's neck, any struggle would drive them deeper, overwhelming training with pain and reducing a guard dog to an animal consumed by agony. Justice launched himself at the first man emerging from the basement stairs. Joey Chains had expected an attack, but not the speed. 85 pounds of trained German Shepherd at full acceleration crossed the 15-foot distance in under 2 seconds. Justice's teeth clamped onto Joey's forearm, the same arm, raised to shield his throat. The breed's designed bite force took effect instantly. Joey screamed as bone cracked under pressure. Teeth built to lock onto struggling prey held firm despite his frantic attempts to shake the dog loose. That was when Vinny deployed the catch pole. The noose dropped over Justice's head from behind and snapped tight around his neck, even as if the dog refused to release his grip on Joey's arm. The barbs tore through Justice's fur, then punctured the skin beneath, and the pain finally forced him to release his grip on Joey. But even then, even with a barbed noose slicing deeper, every time he moved, Justice didn't collapse. He didn't whimper. He didn't run. He turned, straining toward the man holding the pole, still trying to defend, still trying to protect, ignoring every signal in his body telling him to escape. That's when the other 4 men closed in. What happened next wasn't a quick kill. It was deliberate. A slow, systematic beating designed not for speed, but for suffering. They struck him with lead pipes. Vinny kept the noose taut, stretching Justice's neck just far enough to stop him from turning his head or using his jaws. Frankie Knuckles shattered Justice's front leg with a single blow, a strike any veterinarian would have known wasn't an accident. Dom the Torch burned the dog's face with a lighter, grinning as the smell of scorched fur spread through the air. Sally Hooks drove steel-toed boots into Justice's ribs until the sound of cracking bones overpowered the growling. The pain finally made Justice cry out, and Vinny the camera kept filming. Every second, every yelp, every twitch, every failed attempt to rise. That footage wasn't for them, it was for Bumpy. It was the evidence Tony Bender demanded. The kind of footage you didn't describe. You showed it. You made the message hit harder than bullets. That even Bumpy Johnson's most loyal companion, his shadow, his shield, could be broken. At 9:56 a.m., they dragged Justice down to the basement. He was still alive, still aware. His shattered leg left a blood trail across each wooden step. His eyes, glassy but alert, held the same Stunned confusion that animals show when they realize what humans are capable of. They loaded him into the back of a van. A commercial truck with Martinelli and Sons meat processing painted on the side. A real company, Sally's family business. 3 generations in Brooklyn, sometimes used for meat, sometimes for secrets. They drove south to the Martinelli plant in Red Hook. It took 23 minutes. Justice lay bleeding on cold metal the entire ride, his leg bent wrong, fur matted with blood. Still trying to move. Still trying to guard what wasn't there. Even when Frankie Knuckles kicked him again, just for fun, Justice tried to bite back. His jaws snapped into empty air, his body no longer doing what his mind commanded. At 10:27 a.m., they reached the facility. It had been shut down for maintenance intentionally. Sally made sure no one would be there, no one to see, no one to ask questions. Inside Bay 3 was a machine built for death. A grinder the size of a car, made to turn entire cattle into ground. Meat, 2,000 pounds an hour, 50 horsepower motor. It didn't matter what went in meat, bone, cartilage. It all came out the same. They dragged Justice from the van to the machine. Maybe he understood. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was just the noise of the motor, the blood-soaked smell of a place where life ended by design. But Justice fought. One last time, he lunged with his only good leg. His jaws caught Dom the Torch's calf and tore out a chunk of muscle. It would take 37 stitches to close. Dom screamed. Then he pulled out his lighter, held the flame to Justice's burned face for 10 full seconds. The pain forced the dog's mouth open. That's when Vinny yanked the noose tight, tighter than ever before. No breath, no bark, no sound. Justice went limp as oxygen slipped away. At 10:43 a.m., they shoved him into the grinder, still alive, still conscious. The last thing Bumpy Johnson's 8-year companion ever saw was Vinny's camera, pointed straight at the hopper, filming the final seconds before 85 pounds of loyalty vanished into steel blades. The grinder roared to life and finished the job in 90 seconds. Flesh, bone, gone, mixed with yesterday's meat. The 5 men watched until it was done. And when it was over, Vinny looked into the lens and said something the others would later tell police. Something that stuck. Got it on tape. Clear shot of him going in. Bumpy's got to see his mutt turn to hamburger. At 10:51 a.m., Bumpy Johnson returned to his brownstone. He saw the broken basement window, the signs of a fight, blood on the tile, furniture out of place. The smell of violence in the air. Justice was gone. Wednesday, August 27, 1952, 10:51 in the morning. Bumpy Johnson stood alone in his ground floor office. Bumpy stood still, staring at the aftermath violence written in streaks and splashes, telling its own story before any detail had been fully processed. The blood on the hardwood hadn't dried yet. It glistened in the grain, pooled where Justice had fallen. The furniture was out of place in a way that suggested resistance, not robbery. A chair toppled near the basement steps. Deep claw marks, gouged into the floor, signs of an 85-pound dog fighting not to be taken, dragged by men who didn't care how much pain they caused. But it was the smell that made it final. 8 years of living with a Justice had made Bumpy intimately familiar with the dog scent. A mix of clean fur, cedar shavings from his bed, and the high-grade food that kept his coat strong. That familiar scent was now tainted. Underneath it ran the coppery sting of blood, the chemical edge of terror, animal and human alike. And beneath it all, the sickening burn of scorched flesh. Bumpy's hands remained calm, his breath even, his face unreadable. This control had kept him alive through ambushes, betrayals, and power shifts for over 2 decades. But something inside was shifting. The part of him that had always calculated, always moved with precision, was rewriting its math. Justice had never been just a dog. He was family, a protector, a living being who had saved Bumpy's life more than once and never let him down. Their bond was built on loyalty so absolute, most people never even came close to experiencing it from another human being. The basement window. They'd come in through there. That much was clear. Scratch marks along the frame confirmed forced. Entry after the lock had been disabled. Bumpy crouched low, tracing the blood trail that led downward. Justice hadn't been carried. He'd been pulled, dragged, kept alive for whatever punishment they had planned, and that more than anything locked a new thought into place. They didn't just kill him. That wasn't the point. They wanted him conscious. They wanted him to hurt. That was the message. That was the intention. Make Bumpy watch from afar. Make him understand. Nothing he loved was untouchable. At 11:07 a.m., Marcus Webb arrived. Bumpy had called from the office with only 10 words. Get here now. Justice is gone. They took him. It was enough. Marcus understood what that meant. He showed up ready with 2 others from Bumpy's inner circle, Terrence Smoke Washington and James Doc Henderson, both seasoned, both familiar with Harlem's violent rhythms. Both knew what Bumpy's tone meant. Someone was going to die for this. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Marcus had known Justice since the early days, had been there in 1948 when the dog's bark stopped an ambush in its tracks. Smoke had taken a bullet for Bumpy in '49, and during the recovery, Justice had barely left his bedside. Like he understood this man was Pac. The doc had stitched up Justice in 1950 when the dog took a blade for Bumpy. He remembered how the animal had stayed motionless, calm, as if he knew the pain was being dealt by a friend trying to save him. Genovese, Bumpy finally said. No anger in the voice. No drama, just a fact. A conclusion that didn't need evidence to feel true. Tony Bender doesn't have the spine for a direct hit after what happened at the Chinade. This ain't a hit, it's a message. It's warfare of the mind. He paused, eyes scanning the blood-slicked floor, the claw marks, the struggle, the absence. They took him alive. He didn't need to say the rest. The others understood. They filmed it. Vinny the camera had always been Tony, Bender's go-to man for assignments that required undeniable proof. Marcus knew instantly what that meant. They filmed it. Whatever they did to Justice, they recorded it so Bumpy could see it. So he would understand exactly what they were capable of. That means, Bumpy said quietly, voice still even while. Something behind his eyes burned hotter with each second. They needed a private location. Somewhere with equipment, no witnesses, total control. Vinny and Sally Hooks have done cleanup work together before, Marcus added. Yeah, Doc confirmed, finishing the thought. Sally's family owns Martinelli and Sons Meat Processing. Red Hook. Been in the Martinelli name 3 generations. They've used that place before. When someone had to vanish completely, he paused. The implication landed. Industrial meat grinder, he said, almost to himself. Jesus, they would, Bumpy replied flatly. And they did. The logic was too precise to ignore. The symbolism too calculated. Justice hadn't just been a dog. He'd been a protector. A living shield. A loyal soul. Turning him into ground product inside a machine wasn't just murder. It was desecration. It was a message. Tony Bender's message. That love could be reduced to meat. That loyalty could be shredded into waste. That no part of Bumpy's world was sacred. That even the symbols of strength could be fed to the gears of cruelty if the enemy had enough money and enough hatred to engineer it. Get everyone, Bumpy said calmly. But beneath that calm was the vibration of a coming storm. One his men had heard before. The voice Bumpy used when death was no longer a question, only a matter of time. I want Vinny the camera, Frank Knuckles, Sally Hooks, Joey Chains, Dom the Torch, all of them. I want them alive, awake, and I want them in that same Martinelli facility by sundown. He looked at Marcus. Can it be done? Marcus glanced at his watch. 11:23 a.m. sunset. 7:52 p.m. 8.5 hours. 5 dangerous men, all expecting some form of retaliation. Just not today. And not with the speed Bumpy Johnson was about to unleash. It'll be tight, Marcus said. But yeah, we'll make it happen. What came next was a masterclass in urban manhunting, a reminder of why Bumpy Johnson had ruled Harlem for 20 years. While flashier, more brutal crime families had burned out or been buried. His strength wasn't just violence. It was intelligence. By 11:47 a.m., Bumpy had activated 16 trusted sources across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Off-duty cops, taxi drivers who ran routes for Italian syndicates, bartenders in Genevieve's-owned bars, bookies who never forgot. A name if money was attached. The message traveled fast, $5,000 cash. 5 men, no questions, no blowback. That some half a year's wages for most was enough to make even loyal foot soldiers think twice. The Genevieves might have had oaths of silence, but they also had debts, addictions, and bad habits, and loyalty when weighed against $5,000 in hand. That wasn't loyalty. That was leverage. At 12:34 p.m., the first call came in. Vinny the camera had been seen at a diner on Mulberry Street, lunching casually with another Genovese goon, looking relaxed, maybe even proud of what he'd done. Smoke. Washington and 4 others were dispatched instantly. By 12:52, Vinny was gone. Snatched so smoothly the waitress didn't realize anything had happened until the coffee she'd poured sat untouched. At 1:18 p.m., intel came in on 2 more. Frank Knuckles and Dom the Torch, drinking at a Bronx social club, celebrating, confident. Too confident. Marcus led the strike himself, bringing 8 men. Both targets had reputations for resisting, and Marcus wasn't taking chances. The sweep lasted 7 minutes. Frank tried to fight. His jaw was broken. Dom didn't get the chance. 1 blow to the head left him unconscious with a mild concussion. At 2:41 p.m., Joey Chains was found holed up in a Brooklyn apartment he used for women in quiet disappearances. Doc Henderson and 3 others hit the door. Joey reached for a pistol under the pillow, got knocked cold with a blackjack. Before his hand made contact, they wrapped him in a rug, hauled him out the front door. A few tenants saw it happen, but assumed they were movers. Sally Hooks Martinelli proved the most elusive. Ironically, because he was exactly where Bumpy had predicted at the Red Hook plant, cleaning up. He'd closed the place, sent the staff home, locked himself inside, bleaching the equipment, washing blood off metal, making sure no trace of justice remained. He was so focused, he didn't hear Bumpy's crew cut through the back fence. At 3:56 p.m., Marcus Webb placed a cold barrel against the back of Sally's skull and whispered, "Don't move, Sally. Don't talk. Put your hands on your head and do what I say." By 4:23 p.m., all 5 men were in custody. All 5 were delivered to the Martinelli facility. To Bay 3, the same place where justice had been butchered. They were zip-tied into chairs. Sally himself had once bolted to the floor, chairs never meant for mercy. Ankles strapped, arms pinned. No chance of escape. 5 men who woke that morning as hunters, who thought they held power, who had chosen cruelty over honor. Now sat where their victims once had, and Bumpy Johnson was on his way. The 5 men sat helpless, restrained, each one aware that something horrific was coming, but none of them yet able to grasp the full shape of it. Bumpy Johnson arrived at 4:47 p.m. sharp. He entered Bay 3 of the Martinelli plant with the same cold composure he'd worn that morning in his blood-stained office. With him were Marcus, Smoke Doc, and 6 others more than muscle. They were there to witness, to spread the story, because Bumpy wanted this remembered. He wanted every crew in New York to hear what happened when 5 men mistook affection for weakness, when they assumed a dog's loyalty was disposable, when they forgot who Bumpy Johnson was. He didn't even glance at them as he entered. He walked straight to the meat grinder. The machine towered in the center of the space, 8 feet high, 12 feet long stainless steel, gleaming under fluorescent light. Sally's obsessive cleaning had made it shine. Bumpy placed a hand on the cold metal, rested it there. He said nothing for a long time, just stood in silence. Then he turned. His voice, when it came, was almost casual, like he was explaining a weather report. Calm, even, conversational. "My dog saved my life twice," he said. "Did you know that?" He looked at each of them in turn. 1948, he caught the ambush before it hit. 3 men with shotguns. Would've been the end of everyone in that car. 1950, a blade got past security. Would've slit my throat, but justice got in the way. Took it for me. He paused. 8 years of trust. Loyalty so absolute I never had to question it. Not once. Vinny the camera opened his mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to explain, but Bumpy cut him off with a single raised hand. "Don't," he said. "Whatever you're about to say, don't, because here's the truth. You're all going to die today. Right here, in this room, in that machine. Same way justice did that. Only difference? Justice was innocent. You're not. His death was murder. Yours will be justice. His pain was cruelty. Yours will be balance. He died undeserved. You earned this." What came next wasn't fury. It wasn't chaos. It was business. Organized. Precise. Bumpy ran this like an operation. The same calm, exacting strategy that had kept him untouchable for 25 years. "Marcus," he said, "I want them to understand. I want them to feel it coming. One at a time, in order. No mercy. Let them think about what justice might have felt. Let them wonder if he knew what was happening. If he was scared, they'll know soon enough." He turned to Vinny. "You recorded it. You watched him suffer. You thought that would break me." Bumpy stepped closer. "So now you're first. You're going to experience what you filmed. And the rest of you, you're going to watch." It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes from the time Vinny was untied to the moment the grinder went. Silent. He fought. Screamed. Begged. He offered secrets. Money. Names. Everything except what might have mattered. Real remorse. They dragged him to the hopper. His terror filled the room. Bumpy stood still, watching. "You wanted to know how justice died," he said. "This is your education." At 5:03 p.m., they pushed Vinny into the machine. Alive, awake. A winder accepted him like it had. The dog indifferently, efficiently. Only this time, the motor strained more. Heavier mass. Denser bone, and for 30 unbearable seconds, there were sounds, horrible, human sounds, sounds the other 4 men would never forget, assuming they lived long enough to have nightmares. Then, silence. Vinny was gone, reduced to pulp. His remains indistinguishable from the butchered product Sally. Hooks had been trying to clean up earlier. Bumpy turned to the others. "That's one." He spoke without emotion. 4 left. "We've got time. We've got tools, and unlike justice, you get to watch. Consider that mercy," he said. "At least you know what's coming." Frank Knuckles was next. 5:27 p.m. He resisted harder. The boxer's instincts kicked in fists, elbows, footwork. But 6 men were waiting. He never had a chance. The hopper was still red. He saw it coming, smelled it. He tried to cut deals. Gave up Genevieve's intel, names, locations, smuggling routes. But Bumpy didn't blink. He wasn't interested in trade. He was interested in symmetry. 5 for 1. Pain for pain. When Frank went into the grinder, it was with every bit of fight his body had left. It didn't matter. The result was the same. By 5:54 p.m., it was Dom the Torch's turn. 20-9 years old. Still young enough to believe in escape. He twisted, kicked, cried, said it wasn't supposed to end this way, but it did. The grinder didn't care about belief. It didn't care about youth. It did its work in under 2 minutes. 3 down. 2 still waiting, and Bay 3 wasn't quiet anymore. It was haunted. Joey Chains was fourth. By 6:23 p.m. When his turn came, the fight had drained out of him. He had watched 3 men die ripped apart by steel, screaming as they were fed into the same machine that had ended justice that morning. He understood now. Resistance meant nothing. There was no escape, no bargain, no forgiveness. There was only the grinder. When Marcus and Smoke untied him, Joey didn't struggle, didn't scream, didn't beg. He simply stood, walked forward, and met his fate with silent resignation. 1 foot after the other. Into the hands of judgment. Sally Hooks Martinelli was the last. At 6:51 p.m. They came for him. He'd been sitting in that chair for over 2 hours, forced to witness what became of the others. 4 men reduced to pulp and silence. 4 fates carved into his brain like burned scars. But more than that, he knew the machine. It was his machine. One he'd serviced, cleaned, maintained. He knew its sound, its feed rate, its internal pressure. Points. He knew what it could do, and now he knew what it had done. And he also knew it was his turn. As they walked him forward, Bumpy looked him in the eye. "This was your house, Sally," he said softly. "Your grinder, your setup, your knowledge. You knew exactly what would happen when you fed my dog into that thing. You knew the sound, the process, the outcome." He paused. "So don't be surprised. You're not a victim. You're just on the wrong side of your own machine." At 6:58 p.m., Sally Hooks Martinelli became the final entry in a day-long reckoning. But Bumpy's work wasn't done. There were still details to handle, bodies to erase, forensic questions to eliminate. 5 dead men could raise attention. 5 missing Genovese soldiers would raise alarms. But this was Sally's plant. And Bumpy now had full access to all of Sally's methods. The same disposal systems he'd used for years to vanish bodies became the solution. The remains mixed with industrial meat were sealed in unmarked commercial bags. No fingerprints, no blood trails, just product. Prepped for removal through Sally's own channels. By 8:34 p.m., 10 hours after Justice was murdered, the floor had been scrubbed. The blood was gone. The bags had left the building. 5 men. Now reduced to the same processed waste they'd once fed to the system. The symmetry was chilling. The justice was complete, and the message was unmissable. Thursday, August 28, 1952, at 10:47 a.m. The next day, a sanitation worker at a Brooklyn waste processing site opened a batch of standard organic waste from Martinelli and Sons. Inside the bags, something was off. The meat wasn't just meat. Medical examiners confirmed it hours later. Bone fragments, human tissue teeth. Dental records eventually matched them to 5 missing soldiers from the Genovese family. The NYPD launched a massive investigation. It sprawled across boroughs, involved multiple agencies, but it went nowhere. The 5 had vanished from different locations across New York, killed by unknown persons, moved by unknown means, disposed of with surgical precision. No blood, no tools, no witnesses. The grinder? Spotless. August 29, 1952. Martinelli plant detective Raymond Murphy stood alone in Bay 3, staring at the same machine. He'd been chasing Bumpy Johnson for over a decade. Never once caught him with evidence that would stick. This scene was different. The grinder was immaculate. Bleached, polished, sterile. Bumpy had shown up voluntarily, calm as ever when asked to answer questions. Murphy didn't bother with threats. "We know it was you," he said. "We know what they did to your dog. We know exactly why you did this, but knowing and proving aren't the same. And you know that better than I do." Bumpy gave a small nod. "Detective, I lost my companion 2 days ago. Someone broke into my home and killed him cruelly. I've been grieving. I've been asking myself who would do something like that." His voice never raised. "If you're telling me I somehow found 5 men, tracked them, and pulled off this whole scenario, well, maybe you're overestimating me. Maybe I'm just a man who lost his dog." The case stayed open. But it went nowhere. There were no charges, no witnesses, just whispers. But everyone in the underworld knew. And more importantly, everyone believed. The aftermath: 5 dead Genovese men, rendered unrecognizable, vanished into the city's waste stream. Tony Bender got the message loud and clear. You could hit Bumpy's rackets, challenge his business, even try to take him out, but if you touched what he loved, if you crossed into the personal, the response would be beyond violence. It would be instructional. Bender sued for peace, sent intermediaries, apologies, money, promises, a truce wrapped in whatever diplomacy organized crime could manufacture, because the Little Italy bloodbath that had been a business. But justice had been family. Epilogue: Bumpy Johnson never got another dog. In the decade that followed, through growing power, shifting alliances, and a city that changed around him, he stayed alone. People suggested it, of course. Another German shepherd, another companion. But Bumpy always said the same thing: justice wasn't a dog. He was irreplaceable. And so, for the rest of Bumpy's life, the space beside him remained empty. The 8 years they had shared weren't something that could be recreated. Some losses don't get filled, they become part of you. You carry them, you live around them. Every year on August 27th from 1953, until his death in 1968, Bumpy Johnson would return to the spot where his brownstone once stood on West 139th Street. He would stand there silently, unmoving, for exactly 8 minutes. 1 minute for each year he had with justice. No words, no ceremony, just stillness. People in Harlem came to recognize the ritual. They knew that on that day, Bumpy wouldn't take meetings, wouldn't talk business, wouldn't negotiate, threaten, or collect. On August 27th, he remembered. And Harlem remembered with him the story of justice and of the 5 men who were fed into a meat grinder for killing him passed from mouth to mouth, block to block. It became more than a crime tale. It became part of Harlem's oral scripture. It was the moment Bumpy Johnson stopped being just a powerful man and became something more human and more dangerous. He could love, he could grieve, but if you crossed that line, he would never let you walk away. There were boundaries you didn't test, cruelties that triggered something deeper than business. Some acts turned crime into something personal, and personal pain, in Bumpy Johnson's world, always ended the same way, with retribution. Delivered clean, cold, precise, the meat grinder. In Bay 3 was never used again. After learning what had happened, Sally Hook's family scrapped the machinery and sealed the bay for good. Eventually, the building was sold and repurposed. But Red Hook locals who knew the truth never forgot. They'd point at the sealed-off bay and say, "That's where 5 men learned killing a dog wasn't just murder. It was suicide on delay, and the payment came due a lot sooner than they thought.